North Korea and the West have long been coupled in a diplomatic dance of threats and counter-threats.
We will not hesitate to use our military might.
But lately, the pace has picked up. North Korea has ignored international warnings against testing ballistic missiles to grow its nuclear program. Washington is laying out its next course of action.
The policy of strategic patience has ended. We're exploring a new range of diplomatic, security, and economic measures. All options are on the table.
The U.S.'s targeted strike last week on an airbase in Syria has been interpreted as a warning to Pyongyang that the U.S. is willing to act on its own. And now this, a U.S. Navy strike group making its way from Singapore to the Korean Peninsula. In response, North Korea says it's ready to strike back. True to his style, President Trump tweeted that North Korea is looking for trouble, but that if China decides to help, that would be great. If not, we will solve the problem without them. As North Korea's closest ally and economic partner, China is under mounting pressure to use its influence. The issue dominated talks between U.S. President Donald Trump and his counterpart Xi Jinping last week. But China says regular military drills in the Pacific by the U.S., Japan, and South Korea aren't helping. And there's been a backlash against a U.S. decision to deploy the advanced THAAD anti-missile system to South Korea.
我们密切关注着半岛局势的发展，在当前形势下，我们认为有关的各方都应该保持克制，不要做加剧局势紧张的事情。
Despite words of caution, Beijing is already preparing for war on its doorstep. It sent 150,000 additional soldiers to its northern border to deal with a potential flood of refugees. As the world wonders who will blink first, many fear North Korea will revive an old tradition of using special events to display military might.
Our top story this evening. North Korea has been holding its big military parade today to mark a key anniversary in the country's history. The regime showed off several new missile designs, and there was a big surprise, what appeared to be a new ICBM. Experts say it could indicate that Pyongyang's missile development program is further ahead than previously thought. Kwon Jang-oh starts us off.
Halfway through the 2.5-hour military parade that took place in Pyongyang on Saturday, North Korea showed off its next generation of military hardware. Pyongyang unveiled what appeared to be a new intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, that South Korean military officials say they've never seen before. Also on display was a new generation of intermediate-range missiles called the Pukgunsang-2, as well as a new version of a submarine-launched ballistic missile.
This was basically throwing the gauntlet down to the West. They're saying, you know, we've got this new missile, and it's much bigger, and it's likely got much more capability than what we thought the KN-14 had.
The range of new hardware on display came as a bit of a surprise and has been interpreted as a show of force to the US President Donald Trump, who has taken an aggressive tone against Pyongyang.
This is the first time North Korea has ever displayed such a range of their missile arsenal. We can see from today that North Korea's missile technology has advanced far more than we had previously thought.
As it's North Korea, being on display doesn't necessarily mean they are operational, but the regime is showing that they are in development. The parade was in celebration of the 105th birthday of the regime's founder and former leader, Kim Il-sung. There had been concern North Korea might decide to mark the occasion with a nuclear or missile test, but it never materialized. Now attention turns to the next important date in North Korea's calendar in 10 days' time, the 85th anniversary of the founding of the military. There's speculation Kim Jong-un might instead take that occasion to carry out a provocation.
Now, US Vice President Mike Pence is due in Seoul on Sunday for a 3-day visit. South Korea's foreign ministry says Pence will meet with acting President Hwang Kyo-ahn and National Assembly Speaker Jong Se-gyun and hold talks with local business leaders. He's expected to send a clear message on the strength of the South Korea-US alliance and on joint efforts to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions and provocations. Pence is also expected to bring up the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system to South Korea amid China's ongoing economic retaliation against Seoul.
Two senior Afghan officials have said the huge bomb launched by the United States against the so-called Islamic State killed at least 90 fighters, many more than previous estimates of around 30. The governor of the district bordering Pakistan, where the 11-ton explosive was dropped, says 3 tunnels in which the militants had taken up position were destroyed in the attack. Fighting has intensified over the past few weeks as Afghan forces backed by American support try to root out the Islamists. Experts believe ISIL has installed bases close to villages, obliging thousands of families to leave the area. A US official who monitored the recent attack, which saw one of the biggest conventional bombs ever to be used in combat, said it was impossible to determine how many fighters might be buried underground.
The conference brought together representatives of 12 countries, including Afghanistan, China, India, Pakistan, Iran and a number of Central Asian countries. Chinese Special Envoy to Afghanistan, Deng Xijun, represented Beijing at the meeting. However, representatives of NATO countries and the United Nations did not attend. The US has also declined to attend, saying it wasn't consulted in advance. The meeting came just after the US bombed ISIL targets in Afghanistan, dropping the largest non-nuclear bomb ever used in combat, killing up to 36 suspected ISIL militants. The conference in Moscow was organized to explore prospects for peace in Afghanistan. The Russian Foreign Ministry said the participants in the meeting have called on Taliban to begin dialogue with Kabul. The ministry said that the sides exchanged views on the situation in Afghanistan. It said in a statement there is a general concern about the growing terrorist activity in the country. The participants emphasized that the crisis in Afghanistan doesn't have a military solution and that the only way to solve the crisis is by political means.
A warning to the US from the foreign ministers of Russia, Syria and Iran. The trio meeting in Moscow Friday, saying any further unilateral action would come with consequences and pose a danger to the whole world. Repeating their condemnation of US airstrikes on a Syrian base, Russia's Sergei Lavrov used Iraq and Libya as examples of previous failed American interventions.
We insist that the United States and their allies should respect Syria's sovereignty and refrain from actions such as the one on April 7th, because they can lead to the most serious consequences, not only for regional, but also for global security and for the foundations upon which the international law and world order are based.
The US fired 59 Tomahawk missiles at the Al-Shayrat airbase last Friday. That was in response to a chemical weapons attack 3 days earlier on the Syrian town of Khan Sheikhoun that killed more than 80 people.
Top ISIL commander Abu Ayyub Attar has been killed by Iraqi government forces in western Mosul. Officials released a statement confirming that Attar died in an airstrike. This comes as security forces continue their fight to retake western Mosul, with battles raging at the edge of the city center. Troops are trying to advance through narrow streets and old neighborhoods, aiming to take control of a historic mosque. The military has ordered residents to hide out in the basements of their homes in case clashes erupt in their neighborhoods.
Okay, next up we have this story for you about this film director. His name is Josh Fox. He's done movies about being against fracking of natural gas. Now he's speaking out against the bombing of ISIS, saying only love stops hate. He said it's official. Donald Trump has learned that dropping bombs gets him good press. That's why he just dropped the biggest non-nuke that we have. Here's another one. Atrocity, murder, abomination. When will we learn that only love stops hate and bombings only create more ISIS? Joining me now, let's bring in the Navy SEAL. Look who's here. The man who killed Osama bin Laden and the author Rob O'Neill. Okay, let's get to some social media reaction first. I want your reaction to Josh Fox. This is what people on social media are saying.
It's been pretty entertaining.
Yeah, will love stop ISIS, who beheads innocents? Makes as much sense as giving them a Pepsi. Then this one, Fox has got more disgust for Trump than ISIS. Also, Josh, why don't you go over there and teach ISIS to love? And now this, we also have a double amputee wounded warrior. His name is Johnny Joey Jones. He said this I lost my legs because my government under Obama was afraid to use the tools they had. So, I mean, it's expendable. I wish I had this administration.
A shocking report this week of mass smuggling of West African migrants into Libya, where they are being traded and sold into modern-day slave markets. In fact, the activity is so brazen, it occurs in open public spaces. While slavery and serfdom in America and Western and Eastern Europe were mostly abolished in the 1800s, Arab slave trading, which superseded the West, has never really gone away. The Global Slavery Index, which uses a broader definition that includes indentured servitude, says the practice is actually still in existence in 167 countries, but 58% of those slaves are held in just 5 countries: India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan warned a Western ally about the ISIS ties of the suspect in the Stockholm truck attack. Foreign Minister Abdulaziz Kamilov on April 14th told reporters suspect Rakhmet Akilov was recruited by the militant group after leaving the country in 2014. Kamilov noted the information was passed on to a Western partner prior to the attack for Sweden to be informed of Akilov's presence in the country. An Uzbek security source noted on April 12th Akilov attempted to travel to Syria in 2015 to join ISIS, but was detained at the Turkish-Syrian border. Akilov sought residency in Sweden in December 2016, but was told to leave the country and disappeared prior to the attack. 4 people were killed on April 7th when Akilov drove a hijacked truck into a department store on Stockholm's famous Drottninggatan streets.
United Nations human rights experts are urging authorities to investigate reports about gay men being targeted and detained in the Russian Republic of Chechnya. According to a human rights activist and a leading opposition newspaper in Russia, there have been increasing reports of gay men disappearing in Chechnya since March. Dmitry Peskov, who is Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman, told reporters in a conference call that the Kremlin has no legitimate information on any such problem in Chechnya. The country is an almost entirely Muslim republic, which includes part of Russia's border with Georgia.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has hit back at the CIA after an outspoken critique by the agency's director. The whistleblowing website made a series of allegations against the US government after Mike Pompeo spoke out at a think tank gathering in Washington.
It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia. In reality, they champion nothing but their own celebrity. Their currency is clickbait, their moral compass non-existent, their mission, personal self-aggrandizement through destruction of Western values.
Assange, a native of Australia, has been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012. He took refuge there to avoid extradition to Sweden over allegations of rape, which he denies.
A solemn service at Rome's Colosseum, known as the Way of the Cross. The biblical account of Christ's death by crucifixion was commemorated by some 20,000 people at the ancient amphitheatre. They were led by the Pope, who asked God for forgiveness for scandals in the Catholic Church and evoked the widespread suffering the world is seeing. We come to you this year with downcast eyes, with shame, and with a heart full of hope. Of shame for all those images of devastation, destruction, and shipwrecks that have become routine in our lives. Francis spoke of the shame he said should be felt over the daily spilling of the innocent blood of women, of children, of immigrants. Earlier, he led a Good Friday Mass in St. Peter's Basilica. Among those remembered there were children killed in Syria and the dozens of Coptic Christians killed in bomb blasts in Egypt on Palm Sunday ahead of Easter in attacks claimed by ISIL.
Security has been increased all over Rome for Easter following recent terror attacks in Europe. Pope Francis is due to follow Mass on Saturday with an Easter message on Sunday to thousands of Catholic followers. Anyone entering St. Peter's Square will undergo airport-style screening, while bomb squads have been deployed to clear all areas where events are taking place. Despite the measures, the atmosphere has been relaxed. The security system is strengthened. We think we're quite safe. There are a lot of police. We feel safe. There are a lot of people here, so I'm calm. The measures extend far beyond St. Peter's Basilica and the square, with all areas of the city fitted with new CCTV cameras. Security in Rome's suburbs has been tightened too, while in some other European capitals, checks are being carried out on people entering cathedrals.
Well, it was just complete panic at New York's Penn Station yesterday, and this came after police used a taser on an uncooperative passenger, and that sound apparently scared people enough into thinking it might have been gunshots. They started running for cover, and then thousands of people were just pushing past one another, dropping bags and shoes along the way.
Everyone just started screaming, and we didn't know what was going on, so I just took them and ran to the back of the store, and we jumped over the counter at Nathan's and just hid in one of the storage rooms, and they had us just stay back there because I was with them and another little girl that couldn't find her family.
Yeah, Amtrak police say 2 people were arrested for disobeying orders. They did use a taser on one of the suspects, but no shots were fired. 16 people were injured.
U.S. retailers falling in the month of March, and it's the second month in a row that they've done so. Actually, the worst 2-month stretch we've seen in 2 years when you put it all together. And speaking of putting it all together, that's what Jeff Flock does for a living. He's at the Lincoln Mall out there in Illinois. Jeff?
You know, there may never be a kind of a zombie apocalypse, but there may be a zombie mall apocalypse. You were looking maybe at one of the last sites you'll see of the Lincoln Mall here in suburban Chicago. This is the town of Madison. And this is about to be torn down. They just got the permit to tear this down. If you look inside this mall, you see it is one of those that is not long for this world. You know, one analyst today, in light of the retail sales numbers, said America is just grossly overstored. Many more stores than they need, and many of them are in malls like this. We've got some exclusive pictures for you, by the way, inside this mall. A fellow who wrote a book called Autopsy in America took some of these pictures. This is happening all over the country, and I tell you, the experts say it's going to get worse. Why? Because it was about 10 years ago, just before the 2008 financial crisis, that a lot of malls did some heavy borrowing. 10-year notes with a balloon payment at the end, and if you do the math, 2007, 2006, 2008, they're starting to come due. We could see maybe an apocalypse of mall closings. This one of the zombie malls on the list, still here, but for all intents and purposes, dead. Donald.
Wow, and the timing is something. You're right about that, especially when you're financing 10 years out. Jeff, thank you for that. Jeff.
London is home to some of the most expensive real estate in the world. So pricey, in fact, that thousands of Londoners priced out of the market are swapping traditional brick and mortar homes for ones bobbing on the waters of the city's historic canals.
But as Jonathan Vigliotti reports, these floating housing alternatives have given rise to some unforeseen problems.
London's meandering canals look like an oasis on a sunny spring afternoon, but increasingly they're a last resort for many who say the city has left them nowhere else to go.
I just thought the only way that I'm ever going to be able to earn any property is by buying a boat, because the concept of buying a flat for £1 million is just way out of my reach, you know, especially when you're earning teacher's wages.
Andy Winter is among hundreds of people who, unable to make ends meet in the capital, gave up life in an apartment to live on a narrowboat. The quirky vessels can be just 5 feet wide and 20 feet long, with enough space for up to 2 beds. But starting at around $25,000, they're a steal compared to property prices. And word has caught on. In the past 5 years, the number of boats on the canals has jumped 64%. More than 10,000 people live on the water, a combination of economics and desirability driving those numbers. In fact, the canals are so popular, increasingly, there's not enough room. Sohra Ahmed with the Canal and River Trust says the capital's 100 miles of waterways are packed.
What we're finding is that there's a little bit of conflict where people want to have mooring space to stop, but obviously the numbers of boats that are passing through, I mean, all those moorings are generally very busy.
There are 2 kinds of boat people, those who have their own fixed mooring or parking space, and those who only have much cheaper cruising licenses, which means they have to move their boat every 2 weeks.
We were hoping to stop
just before Regent's Park, but there wasn't a mooring, so we had to go through London Zoo.
David Cotter and Juliet McCrimmon are new converts to narrowboat life and live on theirs part-time.
I think the main logistical thing with the boat that I've learned is, and it's a good lesson for life really, is you can't have a deadline. You can't have to be somewhere at 2 p.m.
Life on a narrowboat is nothing new. Bargees, as they're known, have lived on UK canals for centuries. It used to be a rather primitive lifestyle, but times have changed.
This is, I suppose, the living area. I haven't got a dishwasher. And that really sucks because I love a dishwasher.
You have a washing machine, though. That's
yeah,
pretty
I can't
impressive.
put plates in it.
Linda O'Hare has lived on her boat and worked in the city for 18 years.
You look at the canal, and it's packed with boats, not a single space.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like 18 years ago?
Oh, there was hardly anything 18 years ago. There were boats around, but you could travel for a couple of hours and you wouldn't see another boat.
O'Hare owns her own mooring, so doesn't mind the company of new boaters. People like Andy Winter, who've been priced off the land, but have found a way of life on the water.
You can own somewhere that you can call your home, that is perfectly reasonable to live in without having to find millions and millions of pounds or get into debt for the rest of your life.
Movies have shown us the Flubbermobile and the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but now Aeromobile, a Slovakian company, is scheduled to launch a flying car on a Monaco supercar show next week. It's been under development since the 1990s. The vehicle converts from aircraft to car. Deploy the wings and you can take off, and fold the wings and you're ready to hit the road. The company will take pre-orders this year, and there's no word on pricing yet.
A landslide at a rubbish dump near the Sri Lankan capital Colombo has killed at least 16 people and injured over a dozen, according to health and military officials. For the second day, emergency workers have been digging into the mountain of refuse in the search for survivors. Over 100 homes were buried. Soldiers have been called in using heavy equipment. The huge dump collapsed after becoming engulfed by flames on Friday, the island nation's traditional New Year's Day. The site's been used as Colombo's rubbish tip as the capital undergoes a facelift. This witness said there was a big noise. We heard people shouting, "My house is buried. 3 of my neighbors are too." Houses behind us were flying towards us. It was like a tsunami. Residents in the area, mostly living in ramshackle accommodation, have been demanding the dump's removal, saying it was causing health problems. Sri Lanka's government said it had planned to get rid of it soon under an infrastructure plan, a promise renewed on Saturday by the Prime Minister.
At least 7 tornadoes touched down in the Texas Panhandle. It was part of a storm system that also brought torrential rain and hail to the area. Funnel clouds swept through the region and took down power lines and sent cows scrambling. So far, there have been no reports of injuries or serious damage.
When you woke up this morning, chances are the first thing you did involved water. Taking a shower, brushing your teeth, making a cup of coffee. We use a lot of water, but some of us more than others. An American uses 570 liters a day, a Saudi Arabian 192 liters, a Malian just 20. Drought, torrential rains, and climate change can disrupt or cut off our supply of clean water. As it is, 1 out of 9 people in the world don't have access to it.
حاولنا جميع المحاولات باش يوجدوا لنا الماء، لكننا نعوذ بالله كان عطا ربي هانو محضرين الماء جنهاوي نشربوا منه، كان ما عطاش ربي نولوا نشربوا بصعوبة.
A global water crisis is just around the corner, so we have to start by reducing our consumption at a personal level, but also in water-heavy industries like agriculture. At the same time, water takes up 71% of the Earth's surface, with almost all water in our oceans and seas. So more and more countries and regions are turning to desalination for their water supply. Desalination is the process of removing salt and impurities from seawater or so-called brackish water so that it can be used for drinking or irrigation. There are close to 19,000 desalination plants in the world, processing 15% more water than a year ago. Saudi Arabia has the most. The kingdom processes 12 million cubic meters of water a day. The technology is vital to communities who live in dry regions or islands. Spain has installed 330 plants in the Canaries. And some countries have mastered the technique, like Israel. Sandwiched between the Mediterranean and the desert, Israel is home to the world's biggest desalination plant. More than half of the water used in homes, agriculture, and industry come from the sea.
Take some desalinated water. This used to be seawater about an hour ago.
Look closer, though, and you'll notice all these countries have something in common. They're rich, and desalination is expensive. The average cubic meter sells for €2.50. That's twice as much as retreated sewer water or rainwater. In addition to being expensive, desalinating water can disturb the natural ecosystem by killing millions of fish eggs and larvae. It's also an energy-consuming process. First, you have to pump the seawater, then carry it in pipes to the plant before it goes back out for use. It takes an average of 3.5 kilowatt hours of electricity to desalinate 1 cubic meter of seawater. These last few years, however, technological advances have been lowering the environmental price tag thanks to a method called inverted osmosis. Seawater passes through membranes that catch the salt and other impurities, and only the water molecules get through. Today, more than half of desalination plants use this technique. Even better, more and more plants are running on renewable energy. Saudi Arabia is preparing the world's biggest solar desalination plant, capable of producing up to 60,000 cubic meters of clean water a day, using only energy from the sun, enough for 100,000 people. There's a last negative consequence, though, that isn't going away despite these technological breakthroughs: the salty residue. Whatever didn't make it to our kitchen tap is 2 to 3 times saltier than in nature and can harm the ecosystem when it's dumped back into the sea. Often, the residue also includes chemicals like chlorine. As of yet, there's no international law on regulating the industry.